¿Desea usted un país de calidad? Entregue calidad, exija calidad.
Televisión argentina de calidad. Clase Ejecutiva. El programa televisivo argentino con certificación de calidad ISO 9001-2008.
Una producción Nova Patagonia.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a Clase Ejecutiva. Deseo compartir brevemente con ustedes una gran alegría. Hemos recertificado calidad según normas, estándares mundiales, ISO 9001, y esto es único en el mundo, siendo este un programa argentino, un programa de televisión argentino, tanto en radio como televisión. Pasamos al tema de hoy. Justamente hace 4 años en Clase Ejecutiva, en nuestra emisión número 53, que aún pueden ver en nuestro portal www.claseejecutiva.tv, habíamos entrevistado a quien era entonces el vicejefe de misión de la Embajada Australiana en Argentina. Justamente hoy vamos, en nuestra emisión 239, a profundizar nuestros conocimientos de este país, que es el 6º en superficie en el mundo, que tiene una economía próspera, tanto en PBI como PBI per cápita, que es ligeramente superior a la del Reino Unido, Alemania y Francia, en términos de paridad de poder adquisitivo, y que esta nación es interesante porque se encuentra entre las más calificadas en el orden de calidad de vida. Justamente el Índice de Desarrollo Humano de las Naciones Unidas lo ocupa en segundo lugar, solo detrás de Noruega. Actualmente su economía está andando bien, a pesar de toda la crisis, y domésticamente se está moviendo bien, digamos, la gente vive bien, manteniendo negocios y consumo. ¿Cómo lo hacen? Gracias a su prosperidad en la agricultura, en la ganadería y la minería fundamentalmente. Pero para saber más, como siempre, mucho más, lo vamos a hacer de la mano de su señor embajador, Richardson, que está aquí presente con nosotros y a quien vamos a consultar después de los títulos de Clase Ejecutiva. Sí, señores, vamos a hablar de negocios con Australia, segunda parte, y para ello hemos invitado a su excelencia, el señor embajador John Richardson. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
No, not at all. It's my pleasure to be here, Rick. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you very much, and allow me to introduce you to the audience. El señor embajador John Richardson es graduado en Economía en la Universidad Nacional de Australia, es funcionario de carrera del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y Comercio Internacional de dicho país, es embajador en nuestro país desde noviembre del 2008. Previamente ocupó el cargo de director de dirección del APEC, Foro de Cooperación Económica del Asia-Pacífico, importantísimo, en su ministerio. Y en el exterior, el embajador Richardson se desempeñó como ministro en Bonn, posteriormente en Berlín y también como ministro en Bangkok, nada menos. En Canberra ha ocupado los cargos de director de Seguridad Diplomática, importante cargo, director del Noreste Asiático y director de Estrategia, nada menos, comercial. Ambassador Richardson, John, in November 2007, I interviewed who was at that moment the deputy
Yes.
chief of mission of the Australian Embassy. But many things have happened since then, and the world has, I mean, changed a lot, mainly from September 2008. So how's the Australian economy performed, mainly since September 2008? I mean, in terms of GDP per capita, unemployment, I mean, the main figures.
Sure. Rick, Australia has actually been one of the few of the developed economies to go through the global financial crisis without going into recession. And that reflects several factors, which I'll come back to. But we have been very fortunate that we went into the global financial crisis with a very strong economy, with a very strong fiscal position, a well-regulated and very healthy financial sector. And we were able to continue to grow initially through the effect of a government stimulus package of both monetary and fiscal measures. And then as that package was unwound to turn us back into the position of fiscal surplus that we have enjoyed for the last several years, we have benefited enormously from the global boom in commodities that Argentina has overall benefited from. So we've been in the fortunate position, as the IMF reported in its last report on the Australian economy, of having, in their words, an enviable performance since the onset of the global financial crisis. And that has been something which we, of course, have been very pleased with, and to have seen that very difficult period through. You mentioned unemployment. Our unemployment did increase. It peaked at about 5.8%, but has now dropped back to around about 5% unemployment, which is starting to reach the point of almost full employment.
Yeah.
Now, our economy across the board has survived the process really pleasingly, and that reflects what I alluded to. Really, over the preceding 25 years, we implemented a very strong program of economic reform designed to make our economy more flexible and more robust, and the rewards, the benefits of what was at times quite a difficult process have become evident during the global financial crisis, continuing the average 3.4% growth that Australia has enjoyed since 1992.
Which is not too bad, I mean.
It's not too bad. 20 years of 3.5% growth has seen a really big transformation in Australia and a significant increase in the wealth of individual Australians. So you mentioned GDP per capita. Our GDP per capita now is around about $55,600 per person, which makes us one of the wealthier of the advanced economies.
Yes, mainly and especially because you are not so many. I mean, you have 24 million approximately.
22.5 million.
Yeah, 22.
But we also actually have a very strong program of immigration, which has actually both been very beneficial for Australia, but has also not only added to economic growth and demand, but has helped to enrich Australia and to make it a lot more culturally interesting as a country than, for example, when I was growing up as a young boy. But, you know, it's in those areas that I see a lot of parallels between Australia and Argentina. We're both countries which have relatively small populations. They're both populations based on high levels of immigration. We both have large, highly productive land areas. Even geographically, we're in a very similar situation, which means the climatic conditions that we have are very similar. And this actually has created a great level of common interest in a number of different spheres. I
have to ask you later on about that. Have you had any big change in the main drivers of the Australian economy during these last years? I mean, we know that agriculture is very important, that cattle is very important, mining is very important, but have you experienced big changes?
Well, if we look at the 4-year period that you nominated, when we went in, when the global financial crisis started, as I mentioned, the Australian government responded very quickly with a significant stimulus package of both monetary and fiscal measures. And in fact, the main driver of growth in 2009 and the first part of 2010 was in fact domestic demand. But as the countries of Asia, particularly China, came through the financial crisis relatively unscathed, we found that from early 2010 the demand for our commodities increased very significantly, and we had a very significant improvement in the terms of trade, as indeed Argentina has also benefited from.
You are a privileged, you are a privileged supplier for China, and I mean, you have the food, they have the need, so the deal is done. Okay. We have to, if you authorize me, John, we have to go to a commercial break. It's okay for you?
Of course, Rick.
Vamos a hacer una pausa y enseguida volvemos con este fascinante programa acerca de Australia, negocios con Australia, segunda parte. Después de esta pausa, mucho más en Clase Ejecutiva.
Pharma, el laboratorio transnacional de origen argentino, líder en salud, performance y productividad animal.
Podés seguir pidiendo deseos o empezar a cumplirlos. Con Quiniela Plus podés ganar más de 350.000 pesos por solo 2 pesos.
La industria alimentaria argentina tiene un proveedor líder, el Bahiense. Materias primas, aditivos y químicos para la industria alimentaria. www.elbahiense.com.
Manténgase informado en Clase Ejecutiva Online. www.claseejecutiva.tv. Alimento para pensar.
Regresamos con el embajador Richardson, embajador de Australia, su excelencia, el embajador de Australia en Argentina. John, let's talk a little bit about your strategic, strategic policies about food security, energy, and immigration. What are you, aiming? What are the main drivers of Australia in such an issues?
Well, let's start with energy, which you mentioned. Australia, of course, is one of the great energy-producing countries in the world. We are one of the largest exporters of coal in the world. And in terms of our own domestic consumption, we largely draw off coal-based thermal energy in the supply of our electricity. So, at the moment, though, we are undergoing, like so many other countries, the challenge of climate change and how we respond to this. So we are looking at how we can actually reduce our carbon footprint, and the government is just at this moment in the process of passing through our Parliament legislation to introduce a carbon tax on the emission of carbons, and that will start at the rate of about $20 a tonne. This will have the effect over time of changing the structure of the Australian economy to make it less carbon intensive. And because inevitably when there are changes in policy settings, there are winners and losers from that, the revenue from the carbon tax will be used to compensate those individuals and businesses which will be disadvantaged through the process. We are also complementing that by a significant increase in the emphasis on renewable energies. For example, there are programs to introduce solar voltaic panels on roofs, and households now can do this and can feed electricity back into the electricity grid. So on the one hand, we are taking policies to reduce our direct carbon footprint by having a more rational economic structure by pricing carbon. On the other hand, we are also looking at what we can do to promote alternative sources of energy, as you were doing here in Argentina.
You mentioned immigration. With all these situations we have in the world, I mean, lack of food, some troubles with the climate changing, and also some natural catastrophes. I mean, Australia is a good place to be. And what about your immigration policies?
Yeah. Australia has always been an immigration country, and we continue to take around about 200,000 new immigrants each year. But as you actually indicated, Australia is also a quite desirable destination. So unfortunately, we cannot accommodate all of the people who would like to actually come to Australia. We have to regulate and control the numbers. We also have to be careful that people do not jump the queue. There is quite a lucrative business, in fact, in moving people into Australia illegally, and that's something which the government is very concerned to stop. We welcome immigrants. They play an enormously valuable role in our society, but there are proper processes by which that will be carried out and carried through. I should also say we, of course, not only welcome permanent immigrants, but we welcome temporary visitors. And we have each year 250,000 new students come to Australia to study. And that again is something which makes both an enormous contribution to Australia in terms of enriching our educational experience, but it provides a very important contribution to other countries in terms of our capacity to help their students. And in the medium term, it creates an enormous pool of bilateral goodwill between Australia and those countries.
It's very important.
It's a very important thing, but we're also want to have young people visit. So we have a work and holiday visa scheme in which young people who have just finished study can come to Australia for up to a year. They can work for part of that time, they can holiday, they can enjoy themselves. And I'm really pleased to say that I expect that we will sign an agreement with Argentina for such an arrangement in the next few weeks.
Well, that's a very interesting thing, Ambassador. And John, let me ask you about, talking about Argentina and Australia, and Argentina. We have, as you said at the beginning of this show, many things in common. And what do you think the main strategic domains, the main strategic fields we could work together concretely, Australia and Argentina?
Well, as I said in my introductory comments, when you look at the two countries, you see how similar we are in many respects. And this gives us a real common interest in areas like trade. We have long both been members of the Cairns Group of Agricultural Free Traders, designed to actually promote a freer, more open international trading system in agriculture. That's something which is really important to both our countries. And indeed, it's important in a broader context to the subject you touched upon, food security. The best way to guarantee longer-term food security is to have high levels of agricultural productivity and confidence that countries can supply your needs. So we work together in those areas very strongly. We work together in terms of a more open world trading system, and of course at the moment it is under a lot of pressure. We work together on a range of multilateral issues of this type, and we hope to deepen that cooperation with Argentina based on that very significant range of common interests that we have. Bilaterally, if you look at the two countries, in the past we tended to see ourselves as competitors. Naturally enough, because in agriculture we produce products which compete with each other. To my mind, that is an old way of looking at the situation. Why? Because in a world where we need to have additional food to feed the millions, billions of people who need to be fed, the growing population, we can actually learn from each other. So we see Australian investment in Argentine agriculture. We see Argentine technologies exported to Australia. We've had groups of agricultural machinery producers go to Australia selling their agricultural technology. We have investment here in Argentina from Australia. Why? Because what works in Australia works in Argentina and vice versa. And in a world of increasing food demand, we both benefit, and the world benefits.
Let's go to the last commercial break. Do you mind? Nos vamos a la última pausa y enseguida regresamos para el gran final de Negocios con Australia, segunda parte, aquí en Clase Ejecutiva.
En Argentina todavía queda gente buena. Electropelva, un equipo de 100 personas a su servicio. Materiales eléctricos e iluminación para hogares, industrias, construcción, comercios e infraestructura. www.electropelva.com.
En Santiago del Estero, lo importante se vuelve urgente. Por eso seguimos sumando, tomando decisiones clave, construyendo un presente más confiable a cada paso. Ya promulgamos la Ley de Promoción Industrial para beneficiar en serio la inversión y el crecimiento. En Santiago ya estamos cambiando y se nota. Gobierno de Santiago del Estero, por una nueva provincia.
Televisión argentina de calidad. Clase Ejecutiva. El programa televisivo argentino con certificación de calidad ISO 9001-2008.
Regresamos para este final, este rush con el señor embajador Richardson, embajador de Australia en Argentina. John, in the context of the Australian foreign policy, I mean, what is the importance of your relations with South America and Argentina mainly? I mean, the ranking of priorities, if we can say it in that way.
Well, of course, in the past, Australia has given high priority to two areas. The multilateral, we have always been very strong multilateralists, and of course, naturally enough, to our own immediate region, the Asia-Pacific. But the very positive development has been in the last 5 to 10 years. We, along with others, have recognized the growing importance of South America, and we are putting an increased priority and effort into developing our linkages at all levels with South America, and importantly in that context with Argentina. So we are taking a much more focused, a lot more strategic approach to that. Why? Because we recognize the importance of Mercosur as a group of countries, the importance of the common interests that we share with Argentina of the type that I have outlined to you, both at the multilateral level and at the bilateral level. So I'm very pleased to see that both sides have been putting increased energy into the bilateral relationship and into developing that broader connection. Indeed, the Mercosur group of countries that I've mentioned are now talking with the CER, which is the common market of Australia and New Zealand, about the possibility of deepening that economic relationship. At the same time as, for example, we in Australia continue to pursue multilateral relations as a high priority.
What can Argentina do to attract more Australian investments? And also, what could Argentinians do to invest their money in Australia?
In terms of attracting Australian investment to Argentina, Australia has been in the past a very significant investor in Argentina, and indeed we continue to have a stock of investment worth probably in excess of $2 billion or more. What Australian investors look for are a stable, secure investment environment in which they can predict, they can feel confident about the future. Clearly, when you undergo an investment, you have to comply with local regulatory regimes, and it is important that those regulatory regimes be efficient, open and transparent. Investors are clearly put off. It's a disincentive if it takes a very, very long time to work your way through a regulatory regime.
Let me think in loud voice. Investors don't like, generally, in general terms, investors don't like labyrinths. Permítame,
Exactly right.
Señor embajador, unos regalitos, por favor, para nuestro invitado de hoy.
Eurotime Outdoor Watches. Relojes deportivos con funciones adicionales para todos los deportes extremos.
Agrofarma, el main sponsor de Clase Ejecutiva.
60 seconds to say goodbye. Thank you very much for being here. But you have perhaps some issue to say?
Well, I was only going to say that one of the deep regrets that I have here in Argentina is I won't be here next year to attend the first Pumas-Wallabies match in the new Four Nations, because we also share an enormous amount in sport, including, I have to say, sadly, the fact that New Zealand beat us both in consecutive weeks in the World Cup.
You still
next year
can
will be
come
a different story.
Next year. You still can come next year. You are formally invited to see Pumas-Wallabies.
Well, that would be a great pleasure.
We'll see. That's another issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, to be here. It's been really a great honor and a great pleasure to have you in Clase Ejecutiva TV.
Thank you very much indeed, Rick, for the opportunity to be with you today and to talk with you. It's a great topic, great developments, great potential for the future. Thank you so much.
Let's do it. Thank you. Señores, nosotros nos escuchamos mañana en Radio Palermo FM 94.7 a las 17 horas, a las 5 p.m. Y nos volveremos a encontrar, si Dios quiere, Dios mediante, a darnos más alimento para pensar el jueves próximo a las 22:30. ¿Y dónde si no? Aquí, en Clase Ejecutiva.